Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. One of my favorite television shows of all time is the Netflix original series Atypical, which follows the transition from high school to college of autistic teenager Sam Gardner. There are many things I love about this show, one of my favorites being that, as someone who is on the spectrum herself, I find Sam and his struggles quite relatable. However, many on the spectrum disagree with me, claiming that the show's portrayal of Sam is actually a stereotypical misrepresentation of adolescents on the autism spectrum. While I generally disagree with them, I have found that they do have some valid points when I hear them out. So what exactly has Atypical been praised for, and what has it been criticized for? Let's find out. At its heart, Atypical follows autistic teenager Sam Gardner throughout his senior year of high school and eventually his first year of college, and does its best to showcase Sam as being just like any other American teenager, dealing with the same things all of them do. Crushes, relationships, academics, family, friendships, a part-time job, and most importantly, planning for the future. Of course, Sam's autism has some degree of effect on how Sam approaches these things, just as it would for a real-life autistic teenager. But at the end of the day, they're still the same experiences as Sam's peers. The autistic main character, Sam Gardner, is played by Keir Gilchrist, who himself has not been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. In theory, this isn't really that bad, given that Gilchrist is simply an actor transforming on screen into someone he is not. Therefore, Gilchrist is not actually claiming to have a disability he doesn't have. However, when neurotypical Gilchrist portrays autistic Sam Gardner, he is imitating autistic behaviors such as meltdowns, not getting jokes, and interacting with others in the wrong way. This is pretty much the same thing as how, when I was in school, my neurotypical peers would imitate my stimming behaviors and social skills, doing this as a way to mock me. That's what makes it seem so messed up for a person who is not on the spectrum to pretend, even if on screen for the purpose of it, to be on the spectrum. Not only is lead actor Keir Gilchrist not on the autism spectrum, but neither is the show's own creator, Robia Rashid. Rashid had created many television series before Atypical, but eventually came to be inspired to create Atypical due to the rising number of teenagers diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. By the second season, the Atypical team began to recruit more members on the spectrum. Still, nonetheless, Sam's family, the Gardner family, is the same as most families generally shown on TV. A white, middle-class family consisting of a mom, dad, and 2 kids. This is somewhat surprising, given that Rashid is herself of Indian descent, though the show does feature the Indian American character of Sam's best friend Zahid. And in general, you can tell from the way the show is formatted and the way Sam is portrayed that Atypical was made from a neurotypical perspective and meant to be viewed from such. To expand a little more, the character of Sam Gardner almost seems to be defined by his autism, and his autism is practically what his friends and family know him for. In fact, Sam's autism seems to influence every plot point, from his relationship with his girlfriend Paige Hardaway to his mother Elsa's affair with a bartender named Nick, and even his father Doug's decision to leave the family for 8 months during Sam and Casey's childhood. In a way, this is almost a bit condescending towards both Sam and the show's autistic viewers. I don't want to say that Sam is a walking stereotype, but he does exude many characteristics that are stereotypical of autism spectrum disorder. Most generally, it seems on the surface that Sam is somewhat of a selfish individual, thinking mostly of his own needs and mostly concerned with how an adverse situation will affect him personally rather than those around him. He also exhibits the model minority stereotype of being a straight A student with the 3rd highest GPA in his graduating class. To learn more about the harm this stereotype and many others have caused, watch my early video essay, Systemic Ableism Against People with Autism. Even Sam's mother, Elsa, is stereotyped as the overprotective autism mom who fervently does stuff such as attending autism walks, frequently attending a support group for autism parents, and she and Sam never spend the night apart until the 2nd season. Although Elsa's overprotective nature isn't entirely unrealistic, many autism parents, particularly these days, tend to put these very real, big fears and concerns aside and allow their autistic children to do the same things as their neurotypical counterparts, such as sleepovers, summer camps, household chores, learning life skills, and babysitting their younger siblings, just as a few examples, because mine sure did. And those are just some general things. Here are some of the more specific stereotypes Sam exhibits. It's revealed in Season 2, Episode 4, Pants on Fire, that Sam is not involved in any extracurricular activities because he believes they are too crowded. But in real life, tweens and teens on the spectrum are just as likely as their neurotypical counterparts to play sports and join all kinds of clubs. I was on the swim team in middle school. I sang in choirs. I was in the school plays. And I was in philanthropy groups all throughout middle school and high school. And although I did have some challenges in those things, they were a very worthwhile experience and one that I knew would be worth having, just as most autistics and their parents do in the real world. Sam is already 18 years old when he finally spends a night away from home for the first time in Season 2, Episode 6, in the Dragon's Lair, and this ends up a total disaster, with the sensory stimuli in Zahid's bedroom being too much for Sam to take, leading him to pace the sidewalk outside Zahid's house while mumbling to himself, which is only made worse when a police officer believes Sam is on drugs and pulls him over. While many on the spectrum often do find themselves overwhelmed in unfamiliar situations such as this, only in extreme situations does it ever reach this point. But even for all the stereotypes Sam exudes, as simple of a person as Sam seems to be on the surface, and despite autism making up almost his entire character, he is, in fact, a dynamic character who starts out as a high school senior who wants to start dating and ends up taking a great journey of self-discovery, which involves maturing, learning many things about himself in the world, meeting new people, becoming closer with those he already knows and loves, making huge, scary decisions, and right before the show ends, embarking on the huge journey of his lifelong dreams. When we first meet Sam at the beginning of Atypical, we learn that he is all but obsessed with the landscape, explorers, and creatures of Antarctica, and that he attends weekly therapy sessions with a therapist named Julia, and he wants very badly to start dating, but his autism makes this difficult for him and for his overprotective mother, Elsa. But if you really watch the show in its entirety and get to know Sam a little more, you know that he has a part-time job at Techtropolis, at which he's a very good worker, where his best friend Zahid also works, that he keeps a journal of his drawings and thoughts, has a desire to be just like other kids his age, has a love-hate relationship with his younger sister Casey, and wants to develop his independence and pursue a post-secondary degree, ultimately majoring in scientific illustration at the fictional Denton University. But most importantly, I mentioned earlier that Sam appears on the surface to care more about his own wants and needs than those of others, and he perpetuates the stereotype that autistics lack empathy, despite claiming himself that this is not the case. But when one really watches the show, gets to know Sam, and is willing to really dissect his character, Sam is actually quite a caring and compassionate individual, even if this is a trait he has to develop over the course of the show. But remember, like I said, Sam is a dynamic character who starts out one way, then ends up another. I'm about to share some of the times Sam shows empathy and even carries out selfless acts throughout Atypical, but if you want to avoid spoilers, I respect your decision to skip right to my final thoughts. But if you've already seen the show or don't really care about spoilers, then I'll carry on. At the very end of the first season, after Sam upsets Paige by telling her he doesn't love her, but rather loves his therapist Julia, while eating dinner with her family at the Olive Garden, she has a violent outburst in the gardener's front yard. This makes Sam realize how horribly he made Paige feel, especially after she reveals that she's also upset over losing a necklace that Sam had given her earlier in the season. In fact, in a voiceover, Sam reveals to the audience that, contrary to common belief about autism, he does, in fact, feel a great deal of empathy in situations such as these. Sam then resolves to make an amends to Paige, not by merely saying sorry, but by attempting to remedy the void Paige has in her heart by going on an extensive search for her missing necklace to bring to her at a silent dance she'd planned just for him, which involves jumping in the school pool and soaking his dance suit. One season finale later, it's time for Sam and Paige's high school graduation, at which Paige is to give her valedictorian speech, but there's just one problem. Paige lost her voice the day before, screaming bloody murder in the hallway after learning that students whom Sam had asked to sign his yearbook wrote mean things in it, such as weirdo, freak, spaz, and loser. Although Sam doesn't know this is the cause of Paige's laryngitis, he knows how important it is to Paige that the crowd hears her speech. So despite his stage fright following an embarrassing incident in a third grade school play, Sam ensures Paige's words are heard by going up on the podium and giving the speech himself. After Paige, it seems the character shows the most empathy for is his best friend and co-worker Zahid. At the beginning of season 3, as Sam is beginning art school and Zahid is starting nursing school, both at Denton University, Zahid asks that Sam make a solemn promise not to let him fail out of nursing school, which Sam not only agrees to, but takes active steps to uphold. Later that season, Zahid enters into a toxic relationship with a woman named Gretchen, who insists that he change his slang, wardrobe, and priorities, and at one point she even shoplifts a Fitbit from their workplace, Techtropolis. Even with all of this, Sam feels the need to save Zahid and remind him of who he truly is, and this involves reporting Gretchen's theft to Sam and Zahid's boss, Bob, even though it angers Zahid to the point that Zahid ends their friendship and even requests to Bob that they never be on the same shift at Techtropolis. Even after Zahid, quote-unquote, unhomies Sam keeps his promise of helping Zahid pass nursing school, and when he hears that Zahid is planning to elope with Gretchen the day of a major nursing exam of Zahid's, Sam carries out an elaborate plan to track Zahid down and stop the wedding and bring him back, even though this means that Sam will miss an important exam of his own. After Sam and Zahid make up following all of this, they move into their own apartment at the beginning of season 4, which centers around a major adventure Sam works hard to prepare for. Sam appoints Zahid to take care of his emotional support animal, Edison the tortoise, while Sam is on his trip, but at one point, Zahid tells Sam that he may not be able to do this due to a medical issue that's come up for Zahid. Sure, at first, Sam selfishly shows no concern about this, only about who will care for Edison while he is away. But by the end of this episode, Season 4, Episode 6, Are You in Fair Health?, Sam has a change of heart and actually accompanies Zahid to his medical appointment, at which they find out that Zahid has testicular cancer. Upon learning that Zahid will need to have one of his testicles surgically removed, Sam resolves to learn how to drive a car so that he can drive Zahid home after the surgery, after years of avoiding this due to his instinct of closing his eyes while driving, which Sam also manages to overcome, all for his friend Zahid, not for himself. Thank you all so much for watching. Coming from an autistic viewer, Atypical is far from perfect representation of the autistic community and definitely has many flaws, but at the same time, it gives a leading role and a voice to an autistic main character, casting him in a positive light that most media does not. Things that would make Atypical better would include a premise that is centered on something other than autism, with the main character who just happens to be autistic, a central family that is not all three white, middle class, and nuclear, and or a character, director, and lead actor who are on the spectrum themselves. But where the show went right was in creating a relatable, dynamic, complex main character, setting a realistic backdrop, and including many hilarious, heartwarming, inspiring, and unforgettable moments. So in my general opinion, the strengths of Sam's story outweigh its weaknesses. Whether you're autistic or neurotypical, what do you think of Atypical? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.